My life's kinda been like a whirlwind tour of the world's kitchen, only with more passport stamps and less sanity. Name's Kira, fresh into the third decade of my ride on this rock, and I've made a living out of breathing in the spices and dishing out the experience through my vlog. So it was just another steamy day in Thailand, with me elbow deep in noodles and peanuts, learning the ropes of an insane pad thai from this little old dude who could have been Yoda's culinary cousin. That's when this tall drink of water, Mark, stumbled into my life, literally. He tripped over a foldable chair trying to get a better look at the pan and nearly ended our romance before it started by nearly sending me headfirst into my own sizzle. Whoa, sorry about that, he chuckled, hauling the chair out of the disaster zone. Just trying to see how the magic happens. You could say it's all in the wrist action, I said, giving the noodles a flamboyant toss. Careful there, wouldn't want to add roadkill tourist to today's menu. Mark laughed, all easy charm and crinkly-eyed smiles. Mark, he said, extending a hand once he was sure it was safe. Kira, the noodle whisperer, I replied, giving his hand a quick shake before diving back into my culinary ballet. And there it was. We clicked quicker than a camera shutter. He was from the States, here to escape the office walls and spreadsheets, which, to me, sounded like a jailbreak from Adulting 101. We spent the week flitting between street food stalls and ancient temples, with him filming the chaos and me explaining the dance between tangy, sweet, spicy, and umami. When the week ended, we swapped digits. Said our see you laters, 'cause goodbyes were for people who had less faith in cheap international texting plans. Months sped past like high-speed train rides, nights spent spilling our thoughts via texts that turned into calls that turned into video chats. Then one day, he just showed up at my doorstep with a ring and a question. We tied the knot 6 months later. Yeah, just like that. Bam. Married. Things took a nosedive after a while. Forget the lovey-dovey honeymoon phase, it was like we'd skipped straight to bickering old couple mode. I'd be coming home from some corner of the world, my brain still buzzing with the new flavors and faces I'd met, and all Mark could do was hassle me about not being normal. You know what a normal wife does, Kira? That's how he'd start, every single time. She cooks, she cleans, she doesn't jet off every other week. Sitting there at the kitchen table, I'd toss my stuff down and give him a look. Seriously, Mark? You think I just flit around for kicks? This is work. My work. To him, it was like my job was make-believe. Work? You think filming some street food and yapping about it online is work? Get real. Get a proper job. Each word stung. It pays, doesn't it? I'd shoot back. But that was never enough. Once, I was up against a deadline, videos needed cutting, articles needed writing, and guess what? Mark barged into the office and dropped a bomb. The house is a mess, Kira. When you gonna clean up? I couldn't believe my ears. You've got hands, Mark. Use 'em. Defying him only cranked his gears worse. What, and let you loaf around editing videos all day? Is that what you call pulling your weight? Freeloader. That's what he called me. In our own home. I'm out there busting my tail to bring home the bacon, I told him, standing my ground. And this freeloader you're talking to just paid off the last of your student loans with her hobby. But it was like talking to a brick wall. All he saw was a wife who wasn't fitting his mold, who wasn't, I don't know, June Cleaver or somebody. And the worst part? Instead of getting it through his thick skull that we were partners in this, he doubled down. Why don't you make something of yourself, huh? He'd sneer. Get a job with a desk, something steady. I am making something of myself. I shouted, slammed my laptop shut so hard I'm surprised it didn't break. You think it's not a real job because I'm not miserable like you? Normal was his favorite word. Bite to eat, 9 to 5, white picket fence, the whole boring shebang. Drove me nuts. But as for me, I wasn't about to let go of my passport or my dreams, no matter what he thought a wife should be. Beatrice, Mark's mom and my mother-in-law, was the kind of person whose idea of a surprise visit was her showing up in your living room ranting about something you did or didn't do. Living just a couple of streets away, she considered our house part of her daily walking route, which basically meant she'd drop by whenever she felt like it. So there I was one Tuesday, laptop open, trying to get some work done on my latest travel vlog. You could almost set your watch by Beatrice. Sure enough, like clockwork, the front door swings open, it's never locked for Beatrice, and there she was. "Working on your little videos again, huh?" Her voice dripped with disdain. She didn't even say hello. I sighed, trying not to look as interrupted as I felt. "Hey, Beatrice. Yeah, gotta keep on top of it." She tossed her oversized purse onto the couch and made herself comfortable. "You know, when I was your age, I was raising kids, keeping a spick-and-span house. Didn't have time for hobbies." Her words plucked at my already frayed nerves. "It's not a hobby, Beatrice. This is my job." Beatrice snorted as she peered over her glasses, which she only wore to make a point. "Call it what you want. When's the last time you cooked your husband a proper dinner? Or are you too busy working on these little trip films?" I bristled. She knew how to hit where it hurt. "Mark eats just fine. I don't hear him complaining." "Oh, he complains, all right. Just not to you." She smirked and picked at a non-existent speck of dust on her trousers. I wanted to scream. Instead, I shut my laptop, a little too hard, and stood up. "I'm right here, Beatrice. And I'm working. Bringing in money. Isn't that important too?" She huffed, getting up. "Well, if you won't listen to me, maybe you'll listen to the pastor. We're having dinner tonight, and he'll set you straight." I was dumbfounded. "Dinner? Tonight? Beatrice, I have deadlines." "Not anymore. You can put off your deadlines to save your marriage. I've seen the signs, Kira. It's now or never." Fuming, I barely managed to keep a civil tone. "Fine. But this is our life, not just mine or Mark's. Don't you forget that." Beatrice smirked, triumphant. "We'll see," she said, and plucked her purse up again. 6 o'clock. And wear something nice for a change. After the door clicked shut, the silence thudded in my ears like the after-ringing of a bell. So much for a quiet workday at home. Now I had to deal with a dinner ambush and a pastor mediating my marriage? Great, just great. Cooking had always been my kind of therapy, mixing flavors like I mixed colors on a canvas. But here came Beatrice, marching into my sanctuary like she owned the place, ready to burn it down with a single glance. That Thursday, I was in the zone, chopping vegetables for a stir-fry, another recipe I'd picked up from my travels. The door flew open and Beatrice waltzed in, all frowns and scowls. "What's that smell?" was the greeting I got. No hello, as usual. I kept the irritation out of my voice, doing my best to stay polite. "Stir-fry. It's a recipe from Thailand," I replied, hoping she'd just sit down and maybe, just maybe, keep her opinions to herself for once. But no dice. "Can't you make anything normal? Real food?" Beatrice scoffed, planting her hands on her hips. I could feel the anger bunched up at the base of my throat, but I swallowed it down, trying to preserve some peace. "I just thought we'd try something new," I said. Mark poked at the food with a fork like he was testing if a piece of roadkill was ready to be scraped off the pavement. "New? I've seen better-looking garbage." "You tell her, Mark," Beatrice egged him on, her arms crossed over her chest. "Yeah, Kira, stick to what you know, which isn't much," he chuckled. His mom laughed along, slapping him playfully on the arm. I felt my cheeks burning up. This was too much, even for me. But before I could come up with anything to say, Beatrice grabbed the skillet from the stove. "Don't waste our time with this garbage," she hurled the contents of the skillet into the trash can. The room fell silent except for the hiss of leftover heat on the empty pan. I stood there, frozen, trying to wrap my head around the fact that the meal I had spent the last hour preparing was now mixed in with coffee grounds and eggshells. My effort to please, to do something different, felt foolish now. I looked at the trash, and I could feel every cruel word and snide remark they ever threw at me sticking to my skin. I couldn't even be mad anymore, it felt pointless. I started to clean up, my movements automatic. The kitchen felt colder now. I knew I should be angry, I should scream or cry or something to show them this wasn't okay. But instead, I just moved quietly, picking up the pieces of my failed attempt at dinner, at trying something, anything, to make this life I was living feel like it had a bit of me in it. The day had heated up more than the forecast said. It was Beatrice's birthday, and against my better judgment, I had gone and got her something special. Wrapped the gift myself, this mirror from Morocco, all hand-painted tiles and real craftsmanship. I thought she might appreciate something unique, something not from the department store clearance shelf. So what did you get her? Mark eyed me as he sprawled over the couch like some lazy cat. Something nice? I said, my hands tweaking the bow on the package, trying to smooth down my rising nerves. He chuckled. You're nice, and her nice ain't the same, Kira. We were in the dining room, this shrine to dark wood and silence, waiting for the queen herself to show up. I heard her before I saw her, that voice curdling the air. Mark, what's the hold-up? There's cake waiting. She swept in, her gaze fell on the gift, and she frowned. What's that? I handed over the package with a hopeful smile. Happy birthday, Beatrice. She looked at me like I was offering a dead rat. But she took it, shredded the paper, and held up the mirror. What in the world is this? I felt Mark's stare burning into my scalp. It's a mirror, handmade from Morocco. I thought it was beautiful, unique. Unique? She squawked, her face scrunching up. It's hideous. And before I could even blink, she slammed the thing onto the floor. Shattered glass skittered across the tiles like wicked ice. Mark didn't even flinch. Kira, what were you thinking? His voice was sharp enough to cut. I stared at the broken mirror, feeling something inside me splinter along with it. I'm sorry, I thought. She cut me off with a wave of her hand, turned to Mark. Tell your wife to stick to cash. Can't go wrong with money. I felt the shards of my patience giving away under my feet. I went to my purse, pulled out an envelope, last-minute insurance I knew I might need, and handed her 5 crisp $100 bills. Here, I said, trying to hide the trembling in my words. She snatched the cash hungrily. Well, that's more like it. Mark walked over, swept a piece of broken mirror with his shoe, looking at me like I was the mess he had to clean up. Next time, just ask me what to get her, he snapped. I dumped the shards into the bin, listening to them tinkle like a chandelier in a quake. A quieter, angrier part of me wished I could tell her exactly where she could stick her money, but instead, I quietly wrapped her cake slices, got through the day without another word. As the hours lurched by, the house filled with the laughter and chitter of guests, all of them ignoring the tense undercurrent that was me and them. I handed out drinks, laughed when expected, and played the part of the devoted wife and daughter-in-law. That evening I sat on the edge of the bathtub, staring at my reflection in the smaller, unbroken mirror there. If only I could buy something to fix what was broken inside, I thought. The silent room seemed to agree, and for a long time, it was the most understanding company I had. The wheels of my suitcase dragged a rhythmic clunking over the joints in the sidewalk as I walked up to my front door. I'd just gotten back from Greece. I was there for a shoot, for weeks of filming and a slice of freedom that I didn't know I was starving for until I tasted it. My keys seemed to jangle extra loud as I fitted them into the lock and swung the door open. What hit me wasn't the smell of the house or the stack of unopened mail. It was Beatrice, planted in the middle of the living room, bags piled at her feet like she'd just claimed a spot on the subway. I'm moving in. she declared, her voice brooking no argument. I felt my exhaustion evaporate into a tight ball of anxiety in my chest. What? Why? She eyed me like I was being thick on purpose. Rent's killing me, and since you're never around, it makes sense. I'll take the guest room. This was the worst kind of surprise, the kind that didn't bring any joy, just a heavy weight. I looked to Mark, seeking an ally, but his face was set in stone. Yeah, Kira, why the hell not? Makes sense to me, Mark said. I heard in his voice the finality of a door slamming shut. But, Mark, He cut me off with a sharp wave of his hand. Don't start. You've been freeloading off my space for years. The word stung, like rubbing alcohol on a fresh cut. That's when my hand dove into my bag, rummaging past the trinkets and memories of Greece until my fingers wrapped around the envelope, the one I kept tucked away for moments impossible to predict. I slapped the divorce papers on the coffee table between us. They seemed to hover for a second before landing, a soft sweep in the tense air. I want a divorce. For a moment, Mark just stared, and the only sound was Beatrice's slow inhale as if she was about to dive underwater. He picked up the papers, and I braced myself for yelling, for pleading, anything. But without saying a word, he scrawled his name across the bottom and tossed them back at me like they were a takeout menu he didn't want. Beatrice, her eyes gleaming like when she found $50 in a coat pocket, actually clapped. It's about time. I looked between the two of them, this pair that was supposed to be my family, and I felt nothing but the need to fill up my lungs. I didn't belong here, maybe I never did. With one last look at the shell of what used to be my life, I grabbed my suitcase. Where you going, Kira? Mark's voice was a dull blade, not cutting enough to hurt anymore. Anywhere but here. My voice came out steadier than I felt. There were no goodbyes, just the click of the door behind me, a soft punctuation mark on the end of a very long, very tiring sentence. It's strange how life can do a 180 when you're least expecting it. A few months since the divorce and life settled into a new kind of normal. My apartment might have been smaller than the house, but it was mine. I was in the middle of a tea brewing ritual that had become my new little evening piece when there was a knock at the door. I opened the door, and there they were, Mark and Beatrice. Like they'd just been out for a walk and decided to stop by. We saw your TV show, Mark said, shoving his hands into his pockets, a sheepish grin smeared across his face like a kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. Beatrice just stood there, a forced smile stretching her lips tight. Yeah? I said, nursing my mug, not stepping aside to let them in. You watching TV together now? You're doing well, huh? Beatrice chimed in, peering over Mark's shoulder to get a look inside the apartment. I leaned against the door frame, taking a slow sip, feeling the heat of the tea and the situation. I suppose, I replied, the edge of a laugh bubbling beneath the surface. It wasn't just small talk they were after, I could smell it. These two never came without an agenda. Beatrice looked desperate, fidgeting with her purse strap, and Mark looked like he was about to try selling me a used car that was 2 steps away from the junkyard. They tried to butter me up with compliments, nodding at my tiny living room as if it was a palace, but I wasn't biting. Their tune changed rapidly when the buttering didn't work. Look, Kira. Mark's gaze darted around, avoiding mine. Things ain't been so great since you left. Financially, I mean. I raised an eyebrow. Is that right? And it's not just about money, Beatrice piped up. It's lonely. We miss you. I couldn't help it then, I laughed. It was dry and had the edge of years of bottled-up frustrations behind it. You miss me? Well, that's a neat trick. Mark's face flushed a shade of guilt so vivid I almost felt sorry for him. Almost. We just thought, maybe we could start over. I leaned closer, making sure they could see the lack of sympathy in my eyes. You thought wrong. I've moved on, and this? I paused, gesturing to the space between us with my mug. This is me being happy. Without the drama, without the mess. You two were the best bad decision I ever walked away from. Beatrice's mouth snapped shut, her face folding into a scowl. Mark just stood there like I'd slapped him across the face. They didn't say anything more, they didn't have to. As they turned away, their shoulders slumped, the door closed with a soft click and I was alone again, my heart pounding a victory march. I turned, pressing my back against the door, sliding down till I was sitting with the mug held loosely in my grip, my laughter ringing out, clear and loud in the empty apartment. Turning the tables never felt so good. My life's totally flipped since the show took off. People can't seem to get enough of me eating my way through the most out-of-way places and bringing back killer recipes. I guess it's true what they say, everyone loves a good comeback story, and mine's being served up nice and spicy. As I sat scrolling through my socials, watching the follower count tick up like it's got somewhere to be, my doorbell rings. Who could that be? I haven't ordered takeout. Lo and behold, there they were again, Mark dragging his feet and Beatrice trying to straighten out her scowl like she's walking into church. Kira, you gotta listen. Mark gets down on his knees right in my hallway like he's about to propose again, which is funny in a sad sort of way. I'll do anything. I'll even clean the house, cook your meals. I crossed my arms, trying not to let my smirk show. Really? You cooking? That'd be the day. And Beatrice, oh, she's got this look like she just ate something sour. Kira, the show's great and all, but family's family. I let out a little chuckle. Oh, I know about family all right. And mine just got a whole lot bigger, a couple million online. They blinked at me, not quite getting it, so I spelled it out. My followers, Mark. They're my family now. And they seem to appreciate me a whole lot more. Beatrice piped up again, with her hands fidgeting like she's trying to pull words out of the air. Kira, we just didn't realize. I cut her off with a little wave of my hand. Save it. I've heard enough. Did I ever tell you about that mirror from Morocco, Beatrice, the one I gave you for your birthday? They both looked at me, puzzled, like two kids who can't remember if they fed the dog. You broke it, threw it on the floor, I reminded her. Beatrice's face fell. Oh, that old thing? I nodded, casual-like. Worth thousands, that old thing. But you wouldn't know value if it bit you in the butt. I swear, you could almost see the cogs turning in their heads as they put two and two together, finally understanding the score. Mark found his feet again, stammering, but we didn't know. Kira, please. I raised a hand to stop him. I've always had money, even when you thought I was down and out. And now, my little TV venture's making sure I've got more than I know what to do with. Mark looked like he was about to pass out, and Beatrice, she was muttering under her breath, something about not knowing. I walked to the door, opened it wide, and stood there. Here's how it's going to be. You two will turn around, walk out of my life, and never come back. I don't need your drama, I've got my own show for that. They didn't move, just stood there gobsmacked. So, I made it real simple for them. Out. Now. And don't bother me again. I got recipes to try and places to see, and none of them include you. Shutting the door behind them, I felt the weight of the world lift off my shoulders. I went back to my kitchen, to my little empire of spices and sauces, to the future I was cooking up one dish at a time. I wasn't really mad, just done. Done with their begging, done with their games, done with anything that didn't smell like success. Or my next big meal. It felt good. No, it felt great. I glanced at my phone again, another 100 followers since I last checked. Yeah, I think I'll be alright. No need to look back when the future's this flavorful.
Alright, everyone's presentations are done. Nick, the manager, said as he tried to move the discussion forward. Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something. Nick interrupted me and began to speak. There's apparently someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. His lackey, Mike, of course, agreed with Nick. I'm leaving. After leaving the meeting room, I started to shut down my computer. I noticed that an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking, there's no point in speaking up, no one will listen, I went home quietly. The next day, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. He was staring at his computer screen, his face pale. Nick! Is something wrong? Mike looked at the screen with him. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Knowing the reason for Mike's distress, I thought to myself, serves them right. My name is Adam. My mother passed away when I was in the 9th grade, and I was raised by my father. Well, you could hardly call it being raised. After my mother passed, my father changed. He drowned his sorrows in alcohol, and though he still went to work, he squandered our living expenses on horse racing. Because of that, I had to start working part-time as soon as I entered high school. Every month, I went to the convenience store with bills in hand that couldn't be auto-deducted from my father's account. Even though I endured it because I didn't want to be alone, I reached my limit in my 2nd year of high school and dropped out. I found a live-in job at a distant inn. Thank you for everything. The day I left home, my father, still staring at the TV, spoke. Take care. That was our last conversation. Back then, 18 wasn't the age of majority, so I needed my father's permission to work, and I couldn't hide my place of employment. Yet, my father never visited me even once. I kept working just to survive, and before I knew it, I was 42. Years of hard work paid off, and I was transferred to the headquarters. I was thrilled to be recognized by the company, as I thought I'd be working in the field until retirement due to my lack of formal education. Listen up. Our work can change the future of our employees. Don't drag us down. On my first day after the transfer, Nick, dressed in an expensive suit, spoke sternly. There was a reason for this. Our inn was located in a prominent tourist destination, known so well that everyone in the state could sing its commercial jingle. At its peak, we had 5 locations within the state. But that was long ago. Due to financial difficulties and aging facilities, only the place where I had worked for many years and the original establishment remained. I was prepared to lose my job anytime, but now there was a glimmer of hope. With the rise of social media, the tourist area where the inn was located started gaining attention again. Depending on how hard the sales department, where I was transferred, worked. We could either thrive or be forced to give up this prime location to the new hotel chains continuously popping up. For Nick, who had switched careers from another industry to strengthen our sales, this was a battle he couldn't afford to lose. I understood why he had to be strict. I will do my best. Nick sneered at my enthusiastic declaration. Did you not hear what I said? I'm sorry. I thought I was listening carefully. Out of habit from years of customer service, I apologized reflexively, though I had no idea what had offended him. Someone was watching me with a smirk. In this department, there are those who are expected to excel and those who have been shoved here because they have nowhere else to go. You are the latter. It was Mike, the section chief. He's 7 years younger, at 35. But he was called to headquarters much earlier than I was and had been moving around within the headquarters ever since. I'm not jealous, but I can't accept that he's my boss. Graduating from a prestigious university, he has an unusually high pride and caused many problems as a newbie, making things very difficult for me when I was the front desk leader. When I found out Mike was transferred to the sales department a month before me, I was disheartened. Mike is right. With just a middle school diploma, there's not much you can do. Don't even think about achieving results. As if I didn't exist, Nick remarked, I'm thirsty. Mike eagerly ran to the coffee maker. It seems Mike is Nick's lackey. I regretted being happy about my transfer to headquarters, wishing I had stayed on site forever. Send a direct mail to every company on this list by the end of the day. Nick only assigned me tasks that even a new graduate could handle. What? There are over 1,000 companies. You want me to send to all of them by today? Yes, if you and your fellow misfits split the work, even those with nowhere else to go should finish by today. I glanced at the employees typing away expressionlessly. They were worn out from customer service, only thinking about leaving on time, or were women reassigned after having children. With zero motivation for work. Even Sam, a new graduate from the same university as Mike, who was supposed to be among the expected achievers, had no enthusiasm for the job. Having joined the company wanting to do customer service. "I don't care what they say, I plan to quit anytime," he said. Only Nick and Mike were highly motivated, making all the decisions between the two of them. I originally only wanted to work at the inn to survive and had no particular attachment to this job. I swallowed my words, thinking I had no right to reprimand them. About a month after the transfer, Nick told us with a frustrated look. "To commemorate the 50th anniversary, we've decided to create a plan exclusive for one group per day. Originally, Mike and I were supposed to come up with it, but our president, Mr. Thompson, insists on hearing everyone's opinions. So, you all get a chance." As Nick explained, Mike began handing out prints. "Make sure not to embarrass Nick. If your ideas are half-baked, you'll have to redo them." It seemed that they had printed his handwritten notes by Mr. Thompson, which included several questions and a section for free responses. It made sense why Nick had to seek our input, given that all responses had to be submitted to Mr. Thompson. We were given a week to think about it, and a meeting was scheduled to compile our ideas. My plan is to let guests enjoy both the old and modern America. Nick began the presentations. Guests would watch a master confectioner at a nearby traditional sweet shop make sweets in front of them. The welcome drink would be premium tea in a bottle. Nick's plan was certainly attractive. After his presentation, Nick called on us to present in the order we were seated. Just as I stood up for my turn. "All right, everyone's presentations are done." "Excuse me, I haven't. I recently found out something." Nick interrupted me. "There's someone in this department who didn't graduate high school and is just a part-timer." He was likely talking about me. I joined the company as a part-timer and was made a full-time employee when I turned 20. That was 20 years ago, so Nick and Mike probably had no chance to know until recently. Meetings should be for employees only. Absolutely right. After that, Nick kept creating opportunities to solicit everyone's opinions, purposefully excluding me from speaking. The meeting unexpectedly heated up and went past the scheduled end time. A few people asked to leave, and the discussion continued with the remaining few. "Still here?" Normally, you'd leave in that situation. Though I had no attachment to the job initially, hearing kind words from customers made me want to make them happier. For someone like me, with nowhere to go, the inn was my home and customer service was my life. I felt pathetic about my current self. "I'm leaving." I left the conference room and started shutting down my computer. I noticed an email had arrived, not in my personal inbox, but in the company's shared email. Thinking no one would listen to what I had to say anyway, I quietly went home. The next day, while preparing the DM as instructed, I heard a commotion from Nick's desk. In his haste to stand up, he hit his knee on the desk. He stared at his computer screen, his face pale. "Nick, what's wrong?" Mike, thinking he should be the first to rush over, approached Nick while still wearing his coat. He peered at the screen with Nick. And he turned even paler than Nick. Why is he so angry? Who is responsible for this company? Nick, more irritated than ever, asked, and Mike answered without checking. Probably Sam. Sam wasn't there because he was attending a morning training session for new hires. Nick gave up on getting angry and returned his gaze to the screen. They were looking at an email that arrived right after the end of the working day yesterday. Apparently, no one, including me, had checked it before leaving. The email was from a large company that used us for their annual employee trips. The president and executives of that company also frequently used our services personally. President of the company, Mr. Mason himself, had declared that neither he nor his company would ever use our services again. Well, some companies cancel their employee trips or stop using our services due to financial struggles. Let's just move on. Mike kept wiping the sweat from his forehead with a handkerchief. Knowing why Mike was so agitated, I quietly watched their interaction. Do you know how much revenue we get from that company? We can find other guests to fill the rooms, but we'll lose the banquet costs, gift shop revenue, rental car fees, and more. Moreover, the gifts were supposed to be prepared by the traditional confectionery shop involved in Nick's proposed plan. If it's known that we incurred such a huge loss at this critical time, Nick's position in the company would be jeopardized. Nick took a deep breath, seemingly trying to calm himself. All right, Mike. Go to New York right now and apologize to Mr. Mason. What? You're coming with me, right? I have urgent work to do. I trust you, which is why I'm entrusting this to you. Please. Mike, believing Nick's sincerity, agreed with a determined look on his face, saying, yes. That's Nick for you. Even if Mike went to apologize, Nick would shift all the blame onto him if the client didn't change their mind. Well, it was Mike's fault to begin with, so it served him right. About 3 hours later, Sam answered a call from somewhere and repeatedly apologized, saying, I'm very sorry. Everyone watched to see what was happening. After ending the call, he informed Nick with a weary tone. When Mike arrived at the client's company, he only made things worse, further infuriating Mr. Mason. He was demanding, get his boss here immediately. It was no wonder Sam was exhausted, dealing with such a call right after returning from training. What is that idiot doing? All right, Adam, you're coming with me. If sacrificing Mike didn't work, then I must be next. Normally, I'd want to refuse at all costs, but I saw an opportunity in this situation. If I can be of assistance, I'd be happy to join you. I immediately followed Nick, and we flew to New York. When we introduced ourselves at the reception, it became clear how serious the situation was. As the receptionist personally escorted us to the president's office. Angry voices leaked through the door, making both Nick and me uneasy. Excuse me. I'm Nick, the supervisor. I understand my subordinate has caused you trouble, and I deeply apologize. Nick, with his experience in the corporate world, knew enough to offer an apology before excuses. However, his customer service skills left much to be desired. I sighed as I saw Mike trembling like a small dog in the corner of the room. What kind of training are you giving your subordinates? Mr. Mason glared at Nick with a red face. The intensity of his gaze made even Nick take a step back. Regrettably, I joined this company only 2 years ago and was unaware of Mike's issues. I should have identified his shortcomings sooner. Indeed. I should have realized sooner. No sensible person would come to apologize and then give a lengthy presentation on the drawbacks of not using their in. Nick froze, his mouth slightly open. Suspecting the worst, I picked up the documents that had fallen to the floor. It seemed Mike hastily prepared these documents on the plane, listing the disadvantages. Disadvantage 1: if you change the venue for the company trip, employees might suspect it's for cost-cutting reasons, leading to a negative impression. Reading it aloud half-jokingly, Nick snatched the papers from my hand and checked the contents with a furious expression. Among the stack of documents was a receipt from a nearby convenience store's copy machine. I felt a pang of dread, hoping he hadn't shown the receipt as well. What do you think he said when I asked what kind of nerve he had to do this? I'm very sorry. Faced with the dire situation, Nick must have thought there was nothing left to do but apologize. In a voice smaller than I'd ever heard from him, he uttered words of apology. He said, I'm a Harvard graduate. I don't believe I said anything wrong. Mike! What have you done? Forgetting his plan to pin the blame on Mike, Nick yelled loudly, even in front of Mr. Mason. I didn't do anything wrong. You're still saying that? Look at him. Mike pointed at me with a shaking hand. I was assigned to headquarters in my 20s and now I'm a section chief. This guy only made it to headquarters at 42. Everything I've done proves I was right. So why are we losing the contract? Having said his piece, Mike collapsed to the floor. Of course. You were sent there because you had nowhere else to go. Mike never expected to hear such words from someone he looked down upon. He lunged at me, and Nick hurriedly stepped in to stop him. Mr. Thompson told me Mike is a quick thinker, and to take good care of him. There's no way he was pushed aside. Don't make things worse here. He didn't say quick thinker, he said only quick-witted, didn't he? I don't remember that part. I recalled the many troubles Mike caused when he was a newbie. When Mike was on the front line, his pride was so high that he never apologized to customers. Customer service, especially in our job, doesn't work alone. It brings both good and bad situations. If the front staff or housekeepers made mistakes, or the cleaning company didn't properly clean a room, one had to apologize to the customers regardless of personal fault. Mike, in such situations, would never apologize, insisting he wasn't at fault. This often angered customers, and as the front desk leader, I frequently had to apologize on his behalf. He caused complaints and disrupted operations, which is why he was quickly moved to headquarters. In departments where he didn't interact directly with customers, his quick thinking was beneficial and things went well. But it seemed his flaws were starting to show. Corporate reservations are supposed to be entered into the system by the sales representative. But a quick check yesterday revealed that more than 10 items were missing from the client's reservation. The handover document clearly stated what needed to be prepared. Why didn't you enter it into the system? Why do we have to give them special treatment? Filling rooms near the banquet hall, setting up all the food in advance. Specifying the brand of wine, they're too demanding. No wonder he always angered customers, I thought, feeling a headache coming on. Grouping them in rooms near the banquet hall is for our benefit too. It makes it easier for the staff to set up beds and serve breakfast since everyone's schedule is synchronized. As for the other requests, Mr. Mason suggested them to lighten our load. I didn't know that. Nick finally seemed to realize that Mike was the one who had angered the client. What did you say to them? I just told them we wouldn't give them special treatment anymore. We shouldn't waste effort on things that don't bring in money. I was utterly exasperated at his lack of understanding of customer service. Of course, we shouldn't comply with unreasonable demands. But carrying over successful practices from past stays makes customers feel remembered and enhances their experience. Good memories encourage repeat visits. That's part of our job. I looked down at Mike, who was sitting on the floor. In our job, nothing is a waste. Mr. Thompson likely moved you to the sales department, hoping you'd finally understand this. How do you think he feels now that you've failed to meet his expectations? Mike, tears in his eyes, fled the president's office. I was amazed he still hadn't apologized. You have it tough, Adam. It's okay, we're all employees of the same company. I deeply apologize for this disrespectful incident. Especially after all the care you've shown us. If it weren't for you, Adam, I really would have stopped staying here. When I heard you were moving to the sales department, I was willing to reconsider if you handled it. Seeing us talk so amicably, Nick's face contorted. Do you two know each other? Adam's service is excellent. I always requested him specifically. Normally, we don't accept specific staff requests, but we made an exception for Mr. Mason, adjusting my shifts accordingly. He had personally stayed at our hotel just before my transfer, and during casual conversation, I mentioned, I'm moving to the sales department soon. If I hadn't told him then, things could have been much worse. Please continue to take care of us. I look forward to it. On the return flight, Nick awkwardly offered me a can of beer. It's still working hours. Of course, I had no intention of forgiving him for a single beer. Nick might try to pin everything on Mike and avoid any consequences. While pondering this, a startling fact came to light. Nick, the tea bottles for the plan have arrived. I handed Nick a bottle labeled with our inn's name. They look good. What are you talking about? These are plastic bottles. I had assumed we would use the trendy, high-end bottling tea. But what arrived were ordinary plastic bottles of tea with customized labels. The only unique aspect was the label, which had the inn's name, making it look customized. Upon further investigation, I discovered that a substantial amount of money was set to be paid to the tea company. It was priced like bottling tea. Does this plastic bottle really cost $100 each? The tea inside is specially blended for us. The extra cost is for that. Wouldn't it be better to use another tea company? Or is there a specific reason we must use this one? As Nick continued to make excuses, I showed him a printed email. I informed the tea company's president, Mr. Mitchell, that we discovered irregular payments and he confessed. He said you two were high school classmates and planned to split the extra money. That idiot. Why did he confess? That's not important. You should worry about yourself, this could turn into a police matter. Opening the bottle cap, I suggested. How about calming down with this tea? It supposedly has a relaxing effect. Nick drank the tea frantically. In the following days, decisions were made about their fates. Mike was reassigned to the General Affairs Department, with no chance of transfer or promotion, as per Mr. Thompson's orders. As for Nick, since the payment to the tea company hadn't yet been made, he narrowly avoided legal trouble. Instead, he was encouraged to leave the company, and to avoid further complications, Nick submitted his resignation. Rumor has it that connections between HR departments have made it difficult for him to find new employment. Even though it was good to have those two gone, something unexpected happened in the sales department. Everyone became motivated and united in refining the 50th anniversary plan. In the end, my plan was adopted. We collaborated with the Tourist Information Center to provide personalized guides. The plan, tailored to the number of guests, was truly special for the 50th anniversary. Hey, is Adam's family coming to stay? I immediately booked that special plan for my family. Sam noticed it on the reservation list and quickly picked up on it. Yes, I'm inviting my father. That's great. I might invite my parents too. I lacked the courage to face my father just as Adam. But here, with the confidence Mr. Mason praised, I felt ready. The 50th anniversary plan was a perfect opportunity to reconnect with my father. I hoped to bring back the days when we could laugh together as we once did.